So again, welcome everybody. Again, thank you for spending this time with us. Welcome back and welcome to, if it's your first time with us. We look forward to bringing you an update on the progress of Net Zero Terrace streets. And this is a deep dive for local authorities. Okay, shall we kick things off? So we all here share a shared challenge. What we want is a high standard of retrofit that works for everybody, regardless of tenure, income. It gives everyone healthy, warm homes while decarbonising heating and hot water as we do. Today is all about one solution, our Zero Terrace streets. We're bringing mainly a local authority audience here today to share our progress on the Net Zero Terrace street projects. Welcome to you all and to everyone wherever you may be. I'm Andy Pinches. I'll be chairing the meeting today. About myself, I've worked in and around Greater Manchester for many years, most of the work culminating in Rochdale, but goes beyond to the wider kind of area, delivering home energy visits with groundwork, as well as other roles in energy efficiency and retrofit. You know, tackling our housing stock is an ongoing shared problem across so many local authorities. You know, we all struggle to cobble together a patchwork of grants and schemes that are available. Tackling terraces of solid wall homes, 150 years old, struggling to get contractors in place. We exhort to bring in innovative finance, but we need easier ways to achieve this. So let's hear about what we're developing now to help local authorities in the future. Bit of housekeeping before we kick off. We will record the session and share it out afterwards, along with the slide deck. And as seen on the slide in front of you there, please can you use the Q&A for any questions that you may have rather than the chat. And we will endeavour to get those answered as we go through. I am joined today by two experts in the field who are working through details of the Net Zero Terrace street solution. Louise Marix-Evans, the Strategic Director at RVE, Rossendale Valley Energy, and Natalie Whittam, who's the Net Zero Streets Officer for Rossendale Borough Council. I'll first pass over to Louise. Over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. So just setting the scene, as Andy said, we've got a shared challenge in our local authorities and for other people. So retrofit, really hard to do at the moment, big chunk of our carbon emissions. And at the moment, it's sort of based on multiple funding streams, which is sort of got complex eligibility. Or we've got technology incentives like the boiler upgrade scheme, and as we had in the past, feed-in tariffs and renewable heat incentive, which aren't available anymore. So yeah, it's a complex mashup of things that is just not currently delivering at the scale and pace that we need, or growing the supply chains that we need. So what we have conundrums, which is on the next slide to whoever's controlling this. So either we do it individual by individual, which is what many of the one-stop shops go for, is so we handhold people through owner-occupiers, or we might work with an individual landlord, or we go street by street and we tackle a whole neighbourhood across that mixed tenure. So it's how do we do that and achieve these economies of scale? And here is a lovely new diagram, which our director, Kate Gilmartin, invented just this morning, the three-legged stool. So this will make sense to lots of you. To decarbonise our homes, we've got to have the three-legged stool, or we've got to have a stable, multifaceted way of delivering. So if you see on the legs, we've got one leg, which is the technical solutions, many of which we've already got. We don't need to go and invent a load of new stuff particularly. The finance part, that's a tricky part, without people having to borrow a lot of money, without something shiny to show for it, which is why people prefer to buy a new kitchen or a shiny new car. So the finance part. It's got to pay. We've got to find a way to pay for it. And the behavioural part. And by that, I don't mean telling us and lecturing us what we should be doing differently as busy people in our homes. What we mean by behavioural might also be termed as practices. So it becomes easy and normal. And my neighbours and friends are doing this as well. It's not a big hassle of paperwork, multiple quotes. So it's an easy way to do the technical, the financial, and the people part, if you like. And propping it up, the rungs are around the bottom of that stool, holding it together, is coordination, quality assurance. And I mean, there's a lot in the news about poor installations and bad customer experience. So we want good assurance, we want coordination, we want it place-based, so we grow those supply chains, and ultimately we need trust, so we all trust in what is happening to decarbonise our homes. And that is one of the things, all the things we're trying to achieve in this project. So I'll pass you back to Andy to tell you more about what we're going to talk about, and see you in a minute.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, so in the next, or the rest of the hour, we'll be doing a quick recap on Net Zero Terrace Streets in a nutshell, bring you up to speed, recap, or let you know what it's about if this is your first one. With some insights into how Rossendale Borough Council and Rossendale Valley Energy, community energy organisation that we work for, are working together. An update on our 3 demonstrator homes, covering preparation work, what we've done so far, short project progress update on our finance and investment work, and then finally we'll touch on what's coming up and how to stay in touch. So let's crack straight on, and I'll hand you over to Natalie Whitten, the Net Zero Street Officer at Rossendale Borough Council, to kick off talking about our project's aims. Natalie.
Thanks, Andy. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you here, and thanks for giving up your lunchtime to hear from us. So to kick off, here's a short reminder of the project. The Net Zero Terrace Streets project was set up to find a replicable, scalable solution to challenge our terraced housing. Stone-built terraces and traditional terraces pose as a significant challenge. They're difficult to heat, they're challenging to retrofit, and they do often have issues like excess cold, damp, and mould. This is an issue that's not just unique to the north. We have around 6 million 2 to 3 bed terraces across the UK. A high proportion are in the private rented sector. In Rossendale, for example, around 40% of our terraced homes are privately rented. And it's estimated that around a quarter of people who rent privately are in fuel poverty. Residents of terraces often miss out when it comes to affordable low carbon solutions. And a lot of terraces don't have the space to accommodate air source heat pumps, so their access to grants is often limited. People will also want to keep hold of the gas boilers until it becomes mandatory to have electric heat. And when that time does come, the default choice for people will be electric boilers, which are cheaper up front, but very expensive to run. And that'll push up costs for people who might already be struggling to pay their bills and keep warm in the winter months. So how can we ensure that no one gets left behind and residents can live in healthier, warmer homes with affordable, low-carbon energy? Our approach is community-focused and it has multiple parts, but we are going to just give a high-level summary of the key elements today, but you can find more detail on our website and in our previous webinars, which we will link to after this session. In short then, our approach includes, firstly, some physical infrastructure. We'll deliver a package of retrofit measures to reduce the heat load of the property so that heating and hot water can be provided by a 5.8 kilowatt ground source heat pump. The pump will be connected to a shared loop of boreholes linked to properties on a street, and solar panels will help to reduce and help with the running costs of the electricity, with excess energy fed back into the grid, any profits generated from that being returned to the community. This infrastructure will come alongside a smart local energy system, so that will give customers access to flexible tariffs and will automatically find the cheapest times to access heating and hot water. This will effectively reduce the spark gap between what's currently the cheaper gas per unit and the more expensive electricity per unit. On top of that, there'll be no upfront costs to join the scheme. The cost of the infrastructure installed will be paid back by a standing charge over a long term. The cost isn't linked to a person or a property, but it will sit with the infrastructure. And a local delivery organisation will operate that service, taking a community benefit approach, returning benefits to the community, so it's not extracting profit, but it's instead covering costs and borrowing. And finally, to roll out the scheme within our communities, we'll have street-by-street engagement from local energy champions. This will help to identify clusters of demand and build up investability, which at the moment, around a third of a street will need to sign up to see this happen. It will be a gradual approach, so implementation won't overwhelm the grid. It will help with planning and identifying new areas for deployment, and that gradual increase in demand will help to develop sustainable local jobs and skills, maximising local economic benefit. And we see that as a shift away from the boom and bust grant schemes that normally fail to sustain a local supply chain. Currently, the process is being tested on 3 demonstrator houses owned by the council, and that will help us to validate our process and refine our approach. In this phase of the project, under our Innovate UK Pathfinder Places funding, we're developing tools and models needed to be able to replicate and scale this up to other areas. And as part of this, the project team are looking at governance structures, procurement models, financial models, contracting options, so that when we do roll this out, it will be straightforward to pick up and deliver. I'll hand you back to Andy.
Thanks, Natalie. That was a great summary of the project and what we're looking to achieve as part of this. As Natalie said, for more in-depth description of what we're doing, don't hesitate to reach out or join our website on the back of previous webinars. I will now pass you over to Louise, should I say, who will have a look at how the partnership between Rossendale Borough Council and Rossendale Valley Energy was developed. Over to you, Louise.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so Rossendale Borough Council and Rossendale Valley Energy, so a local authority and a community energy organisation, we've been working together in partnership on local energy projects for about 3 years now. But before Rossendale Valley Energy even existed, the whole thing kicked off through another organisation based in Bacup, Valley Heritage, who secured about £300,000 from the Community Renewal Fund, working along with Borough Happold and the council, to ask the question: how do we decarbonise Rossendale? And as Natalie mentioned, 40% of houses in Rossendale are terraces. So that identified that challenge or opportunity of the terraced house or terraced homes. That kicked off the establishment of Rossendale Valley Energy as a community benefit society. We've now had grants totaling over about £4 million across loads of different funded schemes, partners and phases. And I think the partnership between the council and the community energy organisation has a very much a shared mission, and that's to make sure that Rossendale and that the people of Rossendale aren't left behind in the energy transition. It is a tricky area to tackle, and the aim is that we create healthy communities with fantastic houses that are resilient into the future, and that everybody there has access to affordable clean energy no matter where they live. And I think one of the big dangers of the terraces, especially up north, is they're just going to get left behind in the local area energy plans, because they're not going to end up with district heating and they're not going to be suitable for air source heat pumps. So where does that leave us unless we demolish them? So yeah, it's a conundrum that we're trying to tackle together. So I'll pass back to Natalie. We've got a bit of a double act going to talk about what each of us brings to this partnership, and how Rossendale Borough Council are working on this.
Thanks, Louise. So firstly, in case some of you don't know who Rossendale Borough Council is, we're a small district council based in East Lancashire. We serve a population of around 71,000 people across 14 wards and 4 townships: Haslingden, Rossendale, Bacup and Whitworth. And as with many other areas in Lancashire and the North West, we have a lot of terraced housing. Around 14,000 of our homes are terraces, and that, as Louise said, is just over 40% of our total housing stock. And because of this, we've a keen interest in being a part of developing the net zero terrace street solution, and we're confident we bring a lot to the table. Firstly, as with any local authority, we're there for the long run, and the partnership aligns with our strategies, be that climate change, economic development, etc. We are a democratic voice. We represent the people. We have a strong understanding of the communities and local businesses' needs. We have a range of skills and experience of works on homes, streets and regeneration of our town centres. More practically, we've provided the 3 demonstrator houses to test out this approach. We're a trusted local voice, and that's helped us with stakeholder engagement in this process, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. And finally, we've had access to some additional resources that are specific to local authorities. So we've been grateful to receive advice from the National Wealth Fund, and we also have access to tools such as parity projects and net zero goal and the like. So working with RB has been critical to help tackle some of the barriers to achieving our target of net zero by 2030. A 2020 assessment showed that only 0.6% excuse me, of emissions in Rossendale are from council's own operations. Most of our emissions are from the borough as a whole, 33% of which are from our domestic buildings. And as one of the smallest local authorities in the country, we realised that we couldn't reach those targets alone, and we'd need to work in partnership with the community. Our housing stock is a big challenge to decarbonise, and as we mentioned before, our residents are losing out on some of the grants available because of it. And in Rossendale, we see that there are clear and far-reaching benefits to testing and scaling up this approach. Not only will it help us achieve our net zero targets, but it'll go even further in other areas. It'll improve the health, well-being, job opportunities, and financial stability of our residents. And back to Louise to explain what RBE brings to the partnership and why they're involved.
Thanks, Natalie. I can't see myself, but I'll assume you can all hear me. So hi there. Rossendale Valley Energy, what do we bring? Why would a council want to work with us or a community energy organisation? So we bring access to our own technical expertise. So our board of directors themselves have a huge amount of expertise and connections and knowledge. But we also bring the ability to build a really wide partnership. And that, if we flip on a couple of slides, you'll be able to see we convene a really big partnership of different people. We also bring the ability to write really good funding bids and to win money. And I'll come on to the different kinds of funding that we've had later, because I could see there was a question about that. We've also got a lot of knowledge and access to the local community. So our directors, many of them are locals to the area, and our energy champions are locals too. So we're from that community, and that's another thing that you get if you're working with a community energy organisation. They're a grassroots organisation that sprung up from that community, and that also brings high motivation. Community energy groups are activists, they're really motivated, they're really creative. We are used to working our way around a lot of barriers. And we also bring access to opportunities for funding that councils can't apply for. And we've got a reach into wider networks beyond local government through our community energy movement, hosted today by Community Energy England, for example. So we're a constructive, well-networked group of organisations. So Rossendale Valley Energy wanted to work with the council, as Natalie outlined. They bring projects forward, they act as an enabler, a convener. They're obviously the democratic local leaders, and they're taking the administrative lead on a lot of the funding at the moment. They also provide us with office space, and then they're really instrumental in access and approval with the communities we're working with. So we're also really grateful because they've given us or provided the three demonstrator houses, which we are installing the retrofit and boreholes on, which we'll explain later. So yeah, as many of you know, though, working in partnership doesn't come without its challenges. So there, of course, have been some. So Natalie, if you outline those for us, that'd be great.
Please, yeah. I think the biggest challenge for us as a council will probably be officer capacity. We are a small but extremely busy council, and we are fortunate to have officers working entirely on this project, but it does often need input from other departments who are extremely busy, can't always give the project priority, especially as we're only funded on this phase of the project until November and have some quite tight timescales to work to. Another challenge has been the uncertainty of working on an innovation project. our differing attitudes to risk and uncertainty are something that we've had to square and work through. We've had to be quite agile and get comfortable with the fact that we don't know everything at this stage, and we need to kind of find our way through it. That's what the Pathfinder funding is for. Having said all of that, though, we have pulled it off. We've run successful workshops with the planning team at the council and a neighbouring council. We've held 2 National Wealth Fund workshops. We've put out communications about RVE's local energy advice services. We've tackled legal, insurance, financial issues relating to demonstrator properties, and much more. It's clear that we're achieving quite a lot together as partnership. Would you agree, Louise?
So that gap was because I couldn't find the mute button. It wasn't because of a hesitation. Yeah, we are achieving a lot, and if we look back, we can see how far we've come. So we've moved on from asking the question to working out how Net Zero Terrace Street slots into the grid. We've had Strategic Innovation Fund Alpha with Electricity Northwest to look at that piece. And we're moving into Network Innovation Allowance funding for the next year to set up a rig and look at how all of the technology interfaces. We've had Innovate UK Pathfinders 1 funding, first of all, which helped us work out how we overcome some of the non-technical barriers like finance, legals, and develop the service model. Then we've also combined DESNES funding for the local area advice demonstrator. So we've helped build up the Fairer Warmth app and platform that is used by our energy champions, and it's widely used by organisations across the UK. So we've been instrumental in getting that fit for purpose and used by our energy champs, but also pulling in data into our system, energy use data and information about people and their homes, which helps us get better data to build our models for Net Zero Terrace Street. So at the moment, we're putting in the demonstrators. We're also working hard on the operational governance, the organisations that will deliver and scale this. The operational governance, so that's all the data transactions, different actors, and developing that service model. Alongside all that, we've got underlying it the digital customer journey. And then we are building, I'll come on to this later, our modelling and finance spreadsheets. So we're looking at how to pay for it. And then Andy's leading a lot of work around our procurement and contracting, because it's one thing to contract someone for 3 homes, another thing for 100, which you'll be more familiar as a local authority audience in how you do that, possibly working through your frameworks. So yeah, we have achieved a lot. Would we do it again? Would we do it again, Natalie?
Yeah, absolutely. Partnerships like these are key to making a difference in our communities. So yeah, definitely.
So yeah, we've been shortlisted for a couple of awards. I know we've been shortlisted for some awards and we've won a couple of awards. So we're obviously doing something right. I mean, all this sounds like it's all a bit too good to be true and possibly slightly schmaltzy. But yeah, it is working quite well. It is working well, isn't it? We are achieving. So now, yeah, we're going to get into the detail of what we've actually been working on.
Thanks both. As you can see, we've come a very long way together. Next up, we'll take you through a look at the demonstrator homes, where we're rolling our sleeves up and installing the Net Zero Terrace Street solution in real homes. Once again, I'll pass you back to the double act of Natalie and Louise, who will talk us through. Over to you, Louise.
Yeah, with the Laurel and Hardy of the Net Zero Terrace Street world, I think, but not funny. So now we're going to talk to you about this next bit, which is how we are using the demonstrator homes to develop a standard. So on the arrows, you can see there that we've got a couple of blue arrows. One is the arrow of where we are now. What's happening in real world now is the top arrow, so the retrofits being installed. We're going to talk to you about that bottom arrow bit of all the stuff we did to get ready. In the last webinar, we told you what we'd been doing around engagement and around monitoring and testing the homes. So if you want to know more about that, have a look at the previous webinar. But so bearing in mind now, we've got all of our monitoring information. We've done the assessments and we've had the design done. So we will now talk about what we had to do to get set up before we installed. But the aim of the standard that we're trying to develop is a standard that delivers the borehole and the shared loops down the whole street at once. I saw there was a question on that. You do the whole street, get it all in, and then later people can connect. As long as we've got the base load of people who want to connect, that third of a street, that magic number, they connect, and then subsequent people can then connect in and get the retrofit. The point of the retrofit is enough responsible retrofit to mean that house can exist happily with the 5.8 kilowatt heat pump. So we're not doing, so a question about why don't we get rid of the need for heat completely, is we're not going to total no need to heat passive house kind of standard, because it will cost probably as much as these houses are worth to deliver. So we want to deliver enough retrofit wrapped around that sustainable low carbon heat that sits in the ground for a long time that we can just pull out efficiently, much more efficient than an electric boiler. And we want to deliver it all to very high standards with the least disruption and to a budget that works for us. So that is the conundrum that we're tackling. So I'll hand back on, and you can see what we did to get ready to deliver the demonstrator.
Please. So in the last 5 months, my colleague Lauren and I, in close collaboration with RVE, have been working hard behind the scenes to facilitate some of these demonstrator works. As a council, we're uniquely placed to engage with a variety of stakeholders, and that has been helpful to enable the works to take place. It shows that even if a local authority isn't a part of a joint venture or a local delivery vehicle itself for Net Zero Terrace Streets, having that enabling role is vital to ensuring a smooth rollout. A key part of that enabling role for us was through our work with the council's planning team. We spoke to our planning team early on in September, meaning that we didn't need to go through the formal pre-application advice process, which saved us some time and some cost. As the works around council-owned properties and land, applications had to go through to Development Control Committee, which only meets every 6 weeks. So we had to make sure that the applications were as valid and robust as possible so that they could get to committee on time. We've built strong relationships with the planning officers who are supportive of the project and are understanding that we're working to quite tight timescales on the demonstrators. So we've also had to reach out to some individual stakeholders for the different types of planning application. For the retrofit applications, 2 of the properties are in a conservation area, so applications were subject to scrutiny from a conservation officer. Through working closely with planning, we contacted the officer early on to discuss the proposals and the project. We maintained this contact with the officer, who was very responsive and helpful throughout the process. And as we established this relationship early on and dealt with any concerns promptly, we received approval for all applications at that committee in January. Separately, for the borehole applications, we reached out to our water provider, United Utilities, who are a statutory consultee on the borehole planning applications as the work involves drilling near to their infrastructure. We contacted United Utilities before submitting the borehole planning applications to discuss the projects and address any concerns they might have. This was positive, and they were quite keen early on to say that when this is rolled out, that they played a part in the early stages of facilitating the project. Despite this, though, they still wanted to add some conditions to the planning application, as they wanted to be sure that no damage would be done to their infrastructure. This could have slowed us down, as we would have needed to apply to the council to discharge the conditions, but United Utilities agreed to withdraw them after we provided them with CCTV sewer surveys, with assurance that we would do a follow-up survey after the drilling to confirm if any damage had occurred, and if so, how we'd rectify it. And we also provided some risk assessments from the drillers to add that extra level of assurance. And because we built that relationship and dealt with concerns early, again, the borehole applications were approved by committee without any issues in December. From this, we are looking to continue to work with United Utilities for the wider rollout of Net Zero Terrace Streets. They're quite keen to create an internal procedural guide for their staff to give advice and set expectations for future borehole applications, which will be really helpful. So we're looking to continue supporting with that. So with the borehole applications approved, we turned our attention to the next challenge, which was making sure we could drill the boreholes safely. The drill rig was going to be on a small strip of adopted highway to the rear of the properties at one site, so it was essential for us to arrange a temporary road closure. As a two-tier authority, we don't have any control over highways, so we had to apply to Lancashire County Council for closure, which takes up to 12 weeks to process and issue. We received that confirmed notice of closure in December, and because of this, we were able to successfully drill the 2 boreholes last month, but we'll speak a bit more about that later. We've made some useful connections at Lancashire County Council, and we're hoping to continue working with them in future for the rollout. But all this preparation wouldn't mean much without the support of the community. So we've been speaking with residents and businesses near the demonstrator site to keep them updated and address any concerns about the works and potentially make accommodations where we can. In September, we delivered a briefing letter to nearby residents and businesses up on site. At that stage, we'd submitted the application for the road closure. We wanted to let them know before they received a notice from Lancashire County Council so that we could resolve any potential issues quickly. We've been back in January to keep residents and businesses informed about confirmed work dates and how that might affect them. So, as an example, we closed off a car park nearby. There was a very small risk of carbon monoxide being released during the drilling. The drillers had protective measures in place, but as an extra precaution, we handed out monitors to properties in the immediate area too, as kind of like a belt and braces, extra layer of protection. At the other site, we completed an initial letter drop in December, and we'll be going back to speak with residents when we have a confirmed drilling date for that. Moving on to our role as landlords, we have worked to ensure that everything was in place for the retrofits and the monitoring inside the houses. So firstly, as we own all of the properties as well as the land at one of our sites, we had to create licenses for the boreholes to be drilled on our land for car park usage and for all of the retrofit works. And this involved a lot of liaising internally with our housing team, property and legal. And some of the things that we had to look at when drafting those terms were, are there any guarantees that come with the equipment? What would the maintenance of it look like? Who owns what? What might go wrong? Is everyone adequately insured? Do we need any way leaves or easements of the land for RVE if they are going to, for example, own the borehole, which is what's going to happen? So these things are very similar to how a homeowner would normally contract with a local delivery vehicle in the wider rollout. So we took away a lot of learning about that contracting process during this. Secondly, looking within the homes themselves, we wanted to get them ready. We needed to get them ready for the monitoring coming after the retrofit. So we took a look at the meters. The meters needed to be smart meters enrolled onto the smart data communications network, and that was important for 2 reasons. Firstly, it will unlock the flexibility of the smart local energy system, and secondly, being on the network will allow us to monitor energy usage data through a consumer access device. Only 1 of the 3 properties meters was enrolled. The other 2 were first generation smart meters that hadn't yet been migrated over to the network. So we contacted the respective suppliers to enrol the 2 meters, but we were told that they couldn't be moved over onto the network and they wouldn't be eligible for doing that for a while. So we asked for them to replace the meters entirely with 2nd generation smart meters, and that was doable because they were nearing end of life anyway. So we now have all 3 houses enrolled, so we'll be able to get some really useful monitoring data from them to compare the pre-retrofit usage with post-retrofit. We also made sure that the meters in the 3 homes were working in credit mode rather than prepayment. Heat pumps are more efficient if they're left on consistently, and prepayment meters can lead to residents disconnecting the power if they don't top up. This is an aspect that needs to be treated with sensitivity because credit mode isn't for everyone. Some people are on prepayment through choice to help with their budgets. Others have been forced onto prepayment to recover a debt. So we are thinking really carefully about how to help people manage their bills and avoid falling into debt. And one of the things is the way that the smart local energy system and the home energy management system will be designed is that once a customer has set their parameters for what they need for heating and hot water, the system will automatically keep this at optimum use, and it will also take advantage of the times in the day where energy is cheaper. And this will help to make costs more manageable for residents. And that might need some input, but very little input from local energy champions to help understand the smart systems and to see how they can make the most of those cheaper times. We are also looking at different approaches to billing, so potentially using things like budget cards rather than, because for some people taking out a big chunk of money through a direct debit or paying on receipt of bill is not sustainable. They want that more incremental approach. So we're looking into how to do that. And we're keeping a close eye on usage and costs in the demonstrator homes themselves to ensure that our tenants aren't falling behind with the bills or overpaying. And we will offer support where needed. And all the learning from this process will be captured when we work with people to co-design and create the home energy management system, which will come later. All throughout this, our tenants have to be at the heart of the process, because after all, it's their homes we're operating in. We and RVE's demonstrator lead, Amaryllis, have been working closely with tenant support workers and our housing team at the council to take as much care as possible during this process. And RVE has worked hard to ensure that the contractors put people and families at the centre of their approach. This is really important and it can't be overlooked. We want the delivery of net zero terrace streets to be as accessible and non-intrusive as we can, whilst also achieving that peak load reduction we need for the scheme to work. So throughout all of these experiences, we've gathered a lot of useful learning, and we'll be taking the lessons learned from that and pulling them together into our Net Zero Terrace Streets guide for local authorities, which will come later this year, and that will sit alongside the wider Net Zero Terrace Streets handbook. We'll give you it. I'll hand over to Louise now, who'll take us through some of the things RVE have done to get prepared for the work.
Thanks, Natalie. So from Rossendale Valley Energy's side of life, we were getting on with selecting a contractor to do the works, and we're negotiating how to do that with our architects, Terrace, who are also our retrofit designers. They are also helping us manage the contract, although the contract with our main contractor is between Rossendale Valley Energy and Koala, the contractor. And Terrace, as retrofit designers and architects, are carrying out quality assurance for us. There was quite a discussion around the way we procure. So Rossendale Valley Energy wanted someone local, someone who could start work fairly imminently, and somebody used to working around people in occupied houses. So that is not a big building company that normally would work in empty homes. So we decided, rather than going out for a great big tender, to carry out a negotiated tender with a local building company. That had to run through checks from the quantity surveyors, because obviously value for money. So they agreed that our chosen contractor, Koala, was good value for money. Koala are keen on having more work with us, building a learning relationship, and learning more about how we can do this at quality, at scale, and with least disturbance to people. There's been unsurprisingly, a lot of learning around the contracting process, which we aim to smooth out in this process, so that next time we do a bigger demonstrator, we can go through that very confidently. So we've been carrying out lots of insurance checks, due diligence. There was quite a lot of dealings with getting the scope of works completed in order to get the contract completed, but not being able to get the scope of works done till we got people on the roof to see how much re-roofing was needed. So we put a letter of intent in place with that took us up to a certain amount of spending, that could manage people's cash flows and get deposits out the door, so our staff could get working before the contract was signed. So none of this is surprising to you in local authorities if you're used to making this kind of thing happen, unless you're used to farming it out to a contract manager and a tier 1 supplier. The learning for us has been really useful. So the scope of work's changed, of course, because once you get on a roof, you discover there's a bunch of the roof that is rotten and needs replacing. Then you discover the roof struts are all the wrong size for modern bits of wood that your suppliers can give you. Anyway, we had to get up there and get roofs mended. Also, we had to put in place licenses, which are a proxy, I suppose, for contract licenses to carry out this works and to check we weren't going to give the council any nasty surprises for their finance team. So if our contractors found that a fitted kitchen cupboard fell apart when they're putting the heat pump indoors, who's going to pay for that? And the lessons from that are really important, because if you've got contractors putting things in houses and on houses and something breaks, something falls apart, if that hasn't been put into the financial modelling and we don't know who's paying to repair something, that could be a mega problem. So those kind of things are being picked up and run through, and we're documenting all this, because I noticed a question about how can you make this easier for replication. The whole point of what we're doing is it will be documented, backed by digital platform, which would take other organizations doing this through all of the checks, all of the quality assurance, all of that due diligence, so it's easier for next time. And then it will be more replicable, and also somebody else, the investor or the mother company or whatever, will be able to have eyes on it. Of course, it's the winter. We had a great big storm, so the roof works had to wait. Other things that came up is one of the sites for the borehole on one of the homes is on unregistered land, showing nobody owns it, or we don't know who owns it. So after looking for people who may own that land, not turning anybody up, we're setting up some title deed insurance on that land in case somebody shows up or something happens. And another one, to me, unexpected, that, you know, looking back, not surprising. Contractors, do they need welfare facilities, portaloos? And if so, who hires it? We found we didn't have hire and insurance as a community energy organisation. That would have added a bunch of extra costs. So all of this really detailed stuff that as local authorities you might be used to your contractors taking care of, we've been learning about that so that we can get the process really smoothed out, so it can be done at a local level using local suppliers, not farming it out to a great big top tier company necessarily, although that's not being ruled out. Moving on to sort of things that we have learned. I know retrofit's hard. I've evaluated lots of retrofit schemes in the past. I've helped set up new retrofit schemes. Watching it happening at really close quarters has been really interesting. And I think that learning by doing is really important to give us integrity and to know that we are all over the detail. So big cheer out for Amaryllis Goodspeed, who's our demonstrator lead, and Annie Pinches, our ops director, who've been wrapped up in high-vis jackets and spent a lot of time on cold sites sorting things out. I think a lot of the learning has been, it's been council specific, dealing with council's legal, dealing with council's housing, but that is real stuff that we would face if we were dealing with social housing, landlords, owner-occupiers, and the shops and commercial premises you find down Terrace streets. So all of those same issues are going to come up. There were some things that came as a surprise because it was new to us. We knew we didn't know everything. We were also under time pressure. Our funder, Innovate UK, wants to see results. We've got to get this done. We want to get it done before the end of the winter so that we can have the remaining heating season for our monitoring. And of course, we have to work around tenants. So the time frame is tight and demanding. The other thing we learned is that you've got lots of experts, lawyers, architects, quantity surveyors, planners, contractors, insurers. And even with a really good risk assessment and a tight plan, we found there are bits where people don't tell you everything. And we can't assume that they've told us everything. So something unknown is going to come up and has come up. And there's an assumption sometimes that people assume you know something, but you didn't. And then you suddenly have to deal with it. So that's been one of our learnings because of these interdependencies. And it's complicated because we're doing the retrofit, which we know is complicated, and we're doing the heating side of it. So moving on, yeah, we've learned a lot. We're documenting all of it. And all of that will be gathered into the Net Zero Terrace Street handbook and method. It will be heavily assessed, and we'll be looking for peer reviewers to help us peer review the process, tighten it up, look for economies of scale without dropping on quality, and keep on moving through the process. Yeah, okay. Back over to Andy, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Louise and Natalie. Some really valuable lessons in the keys of success through being through preparation, getting things in line, but always being ready for that level of unexpected. I will now wait briefly for the slides to catch up, but I will bring you through kind of the work to date as to where we're up to and what we've been doing. And here we go. So it's not. We move on to the next one. Thank you. As Natalie mentioned, we applied for a road closure, but we also had to close the adjacent car park to make room for all the equipment that was needed for the drilling of the borehole, which you can see just there in the picture on the right. There was a lot of potentially dangerous and expensive equipment on the site, so we needed to make sure that it was adequately fenced off and secure, and everything was stored away at the end of the day so that the public couldn't access the site or, to be fair, park back in the car park. As soon as we moved any fences, cars appeared and started attempting to park again. There were also 2 fire escapes that came out of the back of a local business right into the compound, so we made efforts to create a safe passageway through to a fire safety point, which moved as we did the work. While the compound and the area was being constructed for drilling and all the equipment was being delivered, as Louise mentioned, scaffolding was put up on the properties for initial roof inspections. The roofs were then stripped and relaid because it was found that they needed quite extensive works doing to them. And now brackets have been installed, ready for solar panels to be fitted on top of there. In terms of the boreholes for the ground source heat pumps, these were drilled to around 120 meters on average. That depth depends on a number of factors, including geology, size of the heat pump, and kind of the level of heat you want to get back out of it. The drill rig itself, you can kind of see there, it isn't particularly big. It's quite small. The compound, obviously, that was needed for it to accommodate constant water supply needed to be quite big. That water was just pumping constantly for the drilling and the grouting of the ground loop. One thing that surprised me, and I know a number of my colleagues, was that it wasn't that noisy. The first 5-6 meters were pretty noisy as soon as it started getting into bedrock. The compressor in the background seemed to be more loud than the actual drilling itself. I was expecting kind of jackhammer level of noise, but it was really very quiet. And there was also no vibration, again, which I thought would be a big thing with this, but it was very, very, I'd say pleasant. It was not what we expected. Work has also started internally in the attic spaces to install insulation in the rafters, the floor space, as well as an insulated Velux window that's going in. As you can see from the pictures here, and as Louise mentioned, additional timbers were needed to be fitted to the top, to the roof space, to accommodate the insulation depth that was needed in the required specifications. And then work is progressing well internally. But the demonstrators are not just about retrofit work and to see some drilling in built up areas, but it is it's about making a difference. And monitoring equipment has been in place since early last year, so we can evidence differences between then and when the retrofit and the heat system has been completed. And we're gathering really granular data all the way down to which doors and windows have been opened, indoor, outdoor temperatures and humidities, so that we get a good idea of how well the system is performing. And then finally, I will pass you back over to Louise, who will take you through the final section of this afternoon's session, the money. Louise.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I've just been checking. There's some questions about the money. Okay, so how on earth do you pay for this? And as I outlined at the beginning, you know, a lot of this is either paid for by, at the moment, by government grants or government incentives, and people trying to find the money themselves, and that's leaving a big chunk of people out. So I wanted to just briefly bring you up to speed on our current financial modelling and our investment plans. And this is very much work in progress. So what we're doing is aiming for, ultimately, we are aiming for a model that is not grant dependent, because that gives us risks. If we're dependent on grants, somebody in government switches off the grant and pow, the whole thing goes up in smoke. So ultimately, we are modelling for grant-free, and then we're wanting to bring in patient capital, that's pension funds and insurance funds, and also social investment. So that would be looking for social impact. We aren't assuming that we can get carbon credits, and we aren't assuming that we can sell a lot of flexibility to the grid. We will get those things from the smart system, and we will probably be able to get some carbon credits. But again, we're not modelling for that. We're modelling clean, if you like. So the exam question that we're looking at is the affordability to the householder. If it's going to cost me a shed load more than I'm paying now, I'm unlikely to sign up. So what we're doing is we've got to pay for the retrofit, the boreholes, the heat pump, and by way of retrofit, that does include ventilation for people worried about that. It's an appropriate retrofit for these kinds of stone-built or northern houses, which are damp. And we're in a damp climate. So we've got to cover the costs of the fabric work, the borehole work, the in-home controls, and then out of that, the looking after it, running the company, repairing things, replacing items as they break and come to the end of their life. And we have to pay back our investors. We've also then got the energy price. So this is where the smart system will come in. So there'll be solar, off-site community renewables, and then a generation of renewables, a pool of generation that we'll be pulling in through the smart system. So ultimately, all those come together as a cost to the householder, which is how much is it costing me to keep my home warm and power my home. In our modelling, we've got a counterfactual, which is actually putting in an electric boiler. So this is a lot cheaper for people to run than an electric boiler. But ho, I hear you all cry, what if I'm on gas? Gas is so cheap compared to electricity. Oh, what if I'm not heating my home at all? So obviously there are costs the customer's paying now. So the figure that we're sticking into our techno-economic model is we need to try and beat about 1,500 quid for a terraced house. We can get into the details of that. We're monitoring that at the moment. And if you're underheating your house, which I think I might be because I'm cold, we can't make you richer. If you're really, really not putting your heating on, you'll get a better house from this, but we still also, somebody else will need to tackle the fuel poverty side of that. Anyway, this is what we're trying to wrap up. There are lots of sensitivities, the cost of our capital, the cost of doing all of our works, whether we can achieve economies of scale. Some economies of scale can be reached and some are harder to reach because, you know, the cost of labour and so on isn't going to change. So the sort of front end piece of getting the customers, and then the scale, we know it's cheaper to deliver things down whole streets. We know it's cheaper to deliver a lot of boreholes in one go than come to one place and do one borehole and then go away again. So there are lots of pieces of work and lots of other experts who aren't me working on this. So that's some of where we're coming from. And what I'll just touch on is we ran a finance and investors workshop in London in January, and we shared these slides with them, which is we've made progress on identifying how we can bring down some of those costs. So as we scale up, so costs come down. And that's what a lot of the learning from the demonstrator and then the next pilots and demonstrators we want to run will be doing. So we're pulling information in from the techno-economic model. There might be different costs for different areas. And then Ainsley at Abundance is working this into the models and is coming up with this drop-off where we can make it cheaper to install whilst maintaining high quality. It's also cheaper once people attached to the system that's already in place. We know that we can't make it investable at the moment. It's in the negative without grants. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it. But as we will need some subsidy, we will need to merge some grants in to start with to prove it. We'll bring social investment in at that point. We may need some subsidy, which could taper. And then when we get to our lower cost model, we're getting up into a return on our investment. It's still quite low. It's only it's around 4% at the moment. And these are very rough figures we're sharing with you here. It's not the end of it. We are still working hard, but we can bring it into the positive. So we've got other investors we're talking to. As a local authority, you might want to talk to the UK Wealth Fund. You might want to invest. We may end up with joint ventures. So we are moving towards a better looking model. We're positive we're all optimistic we can get to that. We are still pulling in more detailed figures, so we're not ready to share them yet, but we're moving forward. And then lastly, we have set up a community interest company, Looped Energy Communities, who will be the people who help manage the standard, the handbook, facilitate local vehicles to get started up, because I can see there's questions on that, negotiate with national contracts, negotiate with investors, and critically negotiate with government to say, this does need backing now. These communities are left out at the moment, and we need to work with some combined authorities. We'd like to work with you on your warmer homes local to see what we can do to leverage in funding and finance to make that money go further. So we are looking for partners for the next steps to take this to probably some combined authorities, I think. So yeah, running out of time. Thank you. And I'll hand back to Andy.
Louise, as you can see today, this is a big task, but working together, it is possible. One of the key learnings from this is, teamwork makes the dream work. Don't worry if it looks rather daunting at present. We're documenting everything we're doing, and as has been alluded to throughout, the handbooks for both the Net Zero Terrace streets and the local authority work alongside will make it much easier. It is hard, but it's not impossible. With the last minute counting down, I'd like to say thank you for joining us today. It's been a crammed event. We will get to your questions after this and send out answers like we did last time. And if it's just popped up on your screen as it has on mine, please can you have a look at this poll and give us a rating on what you thought of the webinar. Our next event will be looking at a kind of ask the panel situation, a bit like question time, where you can ask us anything and we'll get round to answering. Visit our website that's displayed there, nzts.info, where you can sign up to our newsletter. And very, very, very finally, before I let you all go, tell us about your terraces. Join the call for a fair deal for terraces, and let's all stay in touch. And thank you to our speakers, event organisers, Community Energy England and RVE, and to you all for spending your lunchtime with us. Thank you again for your time. We'll see you soon.